Okay, I will get started anyways. Since we're live, as and when people come, they can start watching us anyways. Okay. Okay, let's get started. I just see a few people here, and I hope the rest will be joining us. Or maybe I'll wait for 5 more minutes, 5 minutes from now, so that we can see at least a few more are coming in. Yeah. All right, let's get started. Just to be fair enough for people who they're punctual. Yeah, I don't like waiting for people who are not punctual. Okay, simple housekeeping. All the audience will be on mute and the video's turned off. And you can really start asking questions in the chat just after the speaker starts speaking. And it would be great if you could be more specific to today's session and today's speakers. If you have more pressing questions, we are always there. You can write to avantgardeinitiatives.com. I know it's a very confusing email ID. Please take a photo of this page, write to us later. But in the chat board today, let's stick to questions for the speakers. I'm really hoping to have good questions. Okay, so that's the thing to start with. And then I am Viveka. I'm the founder of Avant-Garde Initiatives. Avant-Garde Initiatives, it's a one-stop platform for people who want to do any empowerment related activities through education. So that's the thing. When I say anyone, let's emphasize on anyone because it's for anyone, whether it's from a student from a premier institute or from a student from an arts and science background in a rural part of India. So we feel that every talent has to be nurtured in a sustainable and equal way. So that's the reason why we have started this. All of us who are a part of avant-garde initiatives, be it me or the speakers, the moderator, right? All of us are doing it for free during our free time, because we all believe that we can empower each other through education and life skill based activities. So that's the reason. So this is a completely free initiative. We offer guidance in all these things, and we don't just stick to school students and college students. It's like across different people. It's global networking and global connection. So you can definitely log on to our website, avantgarde-initiatives.com, and we have a complete suite of opportunities for people. So just please have a look at it. For the want of time, I'm just skipping this. And today's theme is innovation in the times of crisis, right? Innovation has always been the driving force which propels mankind towards development, starting from the innovation of wheels itself. So we think that it's very important that innovation, again, is going to be the driving force, which will help us step into the new normal. Now, during these unprecedented pandemic time, we believe that innovation is going to be the driving force, which is going to push us forward. To speak about the implementation and communication of innovations, because innovations happen in lab, but there is a policy maker, key decision makers who are behind the government, who is trying to implement the innovation. And there are also people who are involved in communicating this invention so that it reaches to the general mass. Like, people are very comfortable in their own skin, right? So it's very important to make them understand the importance of this innovation and communicate it. So we have two wonderful speakers. To start with implementing innovation, we have with us my very good friend, Dr. Agata. She's a policymaker. She's going to talk about how important it is and difficult it is to implement innovations. And my very great mentor and supporter, Professor Sai Baba, he's in the field of science communication. So he's going to talk about how challenging it is, but how empowering it is to communicate innovations to the general audience. So over to Agata first. Agata, you go live now. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you, Viveka, for organizing this. It's a really cool initiative, and it is a way of channeling a bit more time that we may have during the lockdown when we're not in the lab. It's a very precious initiative. Thank you so much for that. So I'll just introduce myself briefly. My name is Agata Blasiak. I'm a head of digital health innovation at the N1 Labs. I'm a part of the N1 Institute for Health, where N1 means personalized. And I'm also a part of the Institute for Digital Medicine Wisdom at National University of Singapore. But as you can guess, I'm not Singaporean. I graduated engineering in Poland. Then I moved into doing a PhD in molecular neuroengineering in Ireland. And only after that, I moved to Singapore. And sorry, to apply some of the principles that are on the population studies. And then I moved into non-human primate studies with neuroprosthesis. So that was quite a shift to work in the digital health and innovation that happened a year and a half ago now. The two key technologies that we work on in the N1 Labs are based on the AI-derived observation about the inputs and outputs in the biological system. And one of the platforms is called Curate AI, and it's used for the personalized dosing. And so personalized treatment. And the other platform is called Identify, which is about smart drug repurposing for infectious diseases, including COVID-19. So in both of the cases, the idea is to maximize the gain from the drugs that are either repurposed, as in case of Identify, or already given to the patient, already established for specific indications, and just to maximize the effect from those drugs by modulating the interactions between the drugs and modulating them at the specific ratios. And we do use an AI-derived platform for these things. Additionally, we started embarking on many other projects in the space of digital medicine, including for mental health or oncology assistive support, but also for unbiased physical symptom reporting, some digital therapeutics in that area. But also what I want to stress, we are looking into social sciences and behavioral sciences of technology adoption, as it is a very vital part of translational research. So that's what I do.
So are you done with the introduction?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that was really very short and sweet. Yeah. So thank you, Agata, for sharing. Yeah. I hope like people in the live or on Zoom itself, you can start asking questions related to digital health and innovation to Agata. And over to Prof. Sai Baba, who is the TV Raman Pi Chair. Yeah, he's going to talk about communicating innovations. Over to you, Prof. Prof, you need to unmute yourself. Yeah, you're still on mute. Okay.
Yeah. Good morning to all of you. First of all, appreciation to Viveka for this initiative and bringing me into this. And the topic is also very relevant. I work at National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. And one of the domains which I've been concentrating is on science communication and also risk communication, in addition to a few other things which I do. Prior to coming to National Institute of Advanced Studies, I worked for the Department of Atomic Energy for long years. I did multiple things there. And one of the things which I did in the last part of my career was the human resource development, where I was heading the BRC training school at Kalpakam. Now, I think today, this series of discussion is on innovation in the times of crisis, stepping into the new normal world. So before I go into the communication part of it, I think we need to really look at it. That is the innovation. We should realize that innovation is not a step process. Innovation is a continuous process. It's not that we start innovating from a particular time. It's a question of innovation which happens on a continuous process. So that we have to realize. Accepting that crisis like this would push this process of innovating because of the need that arising out of the crisis, which we have, which right now all of us are going through it. In that context, I think we need to really look at into innovation. But then the normal world, I think new norm is what everybody is worried about. But I think this again, I wanted to say that world has not been the same ever since you're born to now. It has been changing. It's not that it will change now. It has been changing and it would change. So only again, it is because of the need. You need to adopt to the requirements of the current situation and then start functioning in that. And maybe in that context, what is the new norm is what you can talk about. Now, we will now touch upon the communication part of it. And I would make a statement that communicating is not a step process and it's a continuum. And by this, what I mean was, it has to be a continuous and in equilibrium with the surroundings. That means it should not happen that, typically it happens to the researchers that while they do research, they think that they can connect to the society after you start getting the results. And this is what I'm calling as a step process. Whereas a continuum means that you keep in touch with the people for whose sake the research is being done in a way that even before, it is possible that what you thought may not happen, but nothing wrong in telling people what you're doing. In that context, the communication has to be a continuum process, and it has to be in equilibrium with the surroundings so that it will become more effective. The another important aspect of communication is you need to differentiate between communicating and publicizing things, and giving publicity and communicating. And there's a large difference between these two there. So the focus of communication is to bring awareness, for taking awareness to the society or to the concerned people, for enabling them to take informed decisions. And that's where the biggest role of communication is there. So the focus of communication should be bring awareness about the development that are happening. It will be there. So that you can take an informed decision. Now, there are various facets of communication. To start with, if you're a researcher, you would like to communicate with the fellow researchers. And that is what we call peer-to-peer communication. Or to a non-specialist. For example, if I'm doing some research, I know more about that domain, but I may need to communicate to people who are in research, but not in this domain. I'm calling this as a non-specialist. I think you need to communicate to non-specialists. And then, of course, you also need to communicate your research to the public, for whose sake we are working. And then ultimately, the most important thing is the person on the road. What are you communicating about your research? So these various facets of research, each component has to have a different approach to communicate. But most important thing for me is, how do you communicate to policymakers? I think Agata is working in policy making. It's very important. And how do you keep the policymakers informed about the developments? And the top of it is the political leadership. After all, the political leaders who are going to be in power or who are aspiring to be in power are the decision makers. The policymakers are advisory in nature, but the ultimate decisions are taken by the politicians who are in power. And we need to do a lot to communicate to them the development, the implications, and the consequences. And I think so you can see that we have a very big role for communicating, depending on the situation, depending on to whom you're communicating. And that is going to be the challenge. And somehow we all agree that we don't teach people about communication. I think at no stage in your career, you're formally taught how do you communicate your research or how do you communicate to your people. Though some efforts are being made, but it's never part of your growing up with your studies. So you start learning it. I think this is one place where I think we need to pay a lot of attention, so that you start learning about it when you're growing, while growing as a researcher, while growing as a policymaker, while growing as an entrepreneur, whatever it is. I think this is what I think is the biggest important part of it, which is missing in many societies. And I think this is the one place where we need to do that. Of course, when it comes to innovation, would it be different? I think innovations would not be, maybe you need to add the component, why do you think it's an innovation? And that where I think you can get people connected to what you can do. I think these are all my initial remarks, and I think we can continue with the discussion. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Prof. Actually, it's a lot of insights. I'm sure Agata and everyone else in the audience would also agree with us, because we're all innovators trying to do something, but the challenges which lie behind in communicating this innovation to the general public and also to key decision makers looks like it's a really very challenging task, because so many people are involved in innovating, in spinning off, in publishing papers, but as you said, it looks like no one really has put in so much thought about communicating it in a proper way to the general audience. So with that was a very quick introduction, self-introduction from both the speakers about themselves and about what they are doing. So that's how we want this webinar to be. We don't want it to be like one person talk. So we rather want it to be interactive. So people in the audience who are able to join us via Zoom later during the, right now we'll be doing the panel discussion where I will be asking a few questions to both the speakers, but after that, I will open it to the question and answers to the audience. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand, and Hemanand, one of the co-hosts here, he will unmute you and you can ask the questions yourself so that it can be more interactive. So that's the perk of joining it via Zoom rather than, watching it live on Facebook. Okay, so my first question is to Agata, because she's the first speaker and it's more of a friendly kind of a chat. So let's over to Agata first. Agata, my question to you is, you are an engineer. I know you are an engineer and you have turned to become this implementer. You've been behind taking decisions and in the policy making role. So I know that innovating something and implementing the same are like really very different. They're same but different, right? They're two facets of the same thing, right? How do you look at this? How challenging it is, or how do you juggle between these two things, wear your hats differently? Yeah.
Thanks, Viveka. Yes, it's a good question, and in my brief bio, you might have picked up that I actually started my research career doing a basic research, and then moved into translational research. So I actually know about this contrast firsthand, what it is to be on the side where you are just free to pursue a research question that is somewhat disjointed from an immediate implementation. So your objective is to fill in the white spaces, go where the lead is. You actually have some flexibility when it comes to changing the research question and changing the hypothesis. And that's actually what happened half through my PhD. And the basic research is very important to just discover, to broaden our understanding and discover our knowledge. And there is a shared understanding that basic research is just not yet applied research. So we need to understand the principle first to come up with ideas how to tap on them later to introduce manipulations or whatnot, if that's the biotechnology or other objective. So moving to translational research, for me, I quite quickly I realized that it's very, very much more connected. You need to be very aware about the context. So the communication that Professor Saibaba mentioned, it works both ways. You need to work with what is already there. It's not like the idea that you have, you can just throw it into the space and it will be taken up. You have to be very considerate what's out there. You have to do your sort of like a market research of if your idea, where your idea fits. You do want to engage the stakeholders from the very start, make them aware of what you're working on, ask them questions, but be smart about it. If you just start picking brain of a medical doctor who's very busy, he may not appreciate it. But if you do your research first and have very targeted questions, they will be willing to help you because they see what's where it's leading, where you're coming from. So you need to identify the gap, come up with a working hypothesis, and then just keep checking with the stakeholders during all the stages of the development. So sustain this communication continuum rather than just do some question. You ask some questions at the start, and then you come up with your product, and you are surprised that the doctors don't want to use it because they already have 9 different companies that brought them 9 different devices, and now they have patients bed with like all of this stack of things, and they all are telling different things, and they have different interfaces, and it's not fulfilling its role anymore. Another example for digital therapeutics or the digital medicine, so the space that I work in, and one of the conferences I listened about the updates about a physiotherapy app, which was an idea brought by the physiotherapists themselves. And the idea of the app was to teach to show some basic exercises to the elderly that were rehabilitating, and they would be able to do the rehabilitation at their homes. And I think the app was even able to analyze the movement of of the limb and maybe correct it, suggest some prompts in that space. And the development of the app took about 2 years. In meantime, the developers did actually check if elderly in Singapore have mobile devices. Will they be willing to use it? And then the time of deployment came, and they found out that not only not many people downloaded the app, but also among the people that downloaded it, not many used it. And what they found out, what the conclusion was, that yes, elderly in Singapore do have mobile devices, but they use it for very basic stuff like communicating on WhatsApp, let's say, or things like that. Rather, they're not as technologically fluent as the app required. Additionally, another suspected reason for this app not working as desired was that meeting a physiotherapist is also a way of social connection, which with the app was not there anymore. So this example was for me very striking, that if we want to deploy a device, we really have to go beyond engineering. We need to communicate. We also have to look into social sciences, behavioral sciences, look into the tech adoption, and do it very early on in the design of your product or of your idea that you want to deploy. So it's very important to strike that balance, and also not to get caught in one field, and not to get too attached to your idea. In my field, in my work, so one of the technologies, Curate AI, is for drug dose predictions, right? Building the models that can predict what should be the next dose for the maximum efficacy, and we ourselves try to do those clinical reality checks, just not to be too deep into trying to find the most optimal model that's going to fit in the data to 0.999 R-square value. If your data comes with an error, of measurement error, but clinical data often does, what is the point of that? What is the point of spending 5 years of dwelling into the mathematical model, also when a simpler model would do the same job than this very, very complex model in terms of what the doctors expect? Because other reality is that we are only using surrogate measures for our modeling, and maybe the long-term outcome will be achieved if there is a certain lower sensitivity that we would appreciate from our engineering background. So that's very important. And the other one example would be from my neuroprosthesis experience is, when you think about it, upper limb neuroprosthesis, yes, it would be amazing to build one to give a patient an ability to play a piano, right? To give a prosthetic arm and you can play a piano. That would be really amazing. But the basic functionality is rather just having this gripping ability. So it's instead of having 100 degrees of freedom, it's actually enough to have few of them, and there is, or at least in the initial stage, and maybe you can build on later on, but a very significant percentage of the functionality desired by the patients, or in this case by the target that we want to reach, is something much less complicated. So it's very important to keep that communication going with the stakeholders, with the doctors, with the patients. Just in this context also, one thing I wanted to mention. So for example, with our technology, we quite often, we not only go to engineering conferences, but we also go to clinical conferences. And yes, we might be a bit of an oddball, poster or presentation, with some engineering staff in it, or a bit heavier than what the doctors are used to. But then the feedback that we get from them is very valuable to us, just like knowing that, you know, they look at it and they're like, oh, I don't really trust it, or I don't really believe it. So then we have to think how to communicate our research to the doctors and try to identify what is important to them. And maybe we need to redirect what we are trying to do.
Okay.
So communication, communication, communication.
Okay. Okay. Looks like implementation and communication are not two different things, actually. So to summarize Agata's views, it's like, looks like you need to be communicating about your innovation to the policymakers from the beginning in every stage, and also not be so fixated on your own technology and just look inwards, but then look outwards, look into every other facets like behavioral and social sciences before you deploy your technology. So that was wonderful and so insightful. I'm sure this should be, you know, evoking a lot of questions. So people, please be ready with your question and do ask when the question and answer session is open. And now I'm very sure Prof. Sai Baba should be having so much to share about too. But my question to him after hearing from Agata is that, okay, Agata says that you need to keep talking to the policymakers and key decision makers at every stage. So Prof, let's assume that it's been communicated to all these big people. How do you communicate it to the general audience now? Looks like it's more difficult to communicate to the general people, the masses, the people who are actually going to use the technology at the end of the day. It's much more difficult than talking to key decision makers. So as a science communicator, what do you think are the challenges, and what are the means that you adopt to overcome these challenges, to communicate the innovation to the public?
Yeah. Thank you, Viveka. I think Agata has emphasized the need for getting connected to the people in like from the beginning. That's what I said in my initial remarks.
Yeah.
Communication is a continuous process and it's not a step process. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge would be, let us take an example of vaccine. Okay, you can see such a simple thing like vaccinating the people across the country. You need to really spend a lot of time and effort to convince people that it is good for you. When it comes to the common person on the general public or the common man, he is influenced by multiple sources. You know, there's always a vested interest which plays a role, or sensationalization would play a role. I think you need to protect your campaign or bringing awareness, keeping these into consideration. It's not sufficient that your research is the best research or your research would lead to the result. That is a fundamental requirement. That is, I do develop a medicine or develop a vaccine or develop a cure, it is expected to solve. I mean, there are mechanisms put in place to ensure that what you're telling is valid. Otherwise, it will not come to the market. I mean, so that no need to tell about that part of it, because that part is taken care of by the regulatory bodies. But then when your question is that when I go to the people, how do I address them? If it is going to address certain belief systems or certain religious beliefs or certain cultural beliefs, cultural acceptance, and the sensationalization by the press or the media or for the people, you know, it is always, if you want to be in the forefront, the negative news always comes to the forefront. You know, you would see that you pick up a newspaper and you would find much of it is about what cannot be done or what has not been done, and that is true. And maybe this is a human weakness to listen to those people. So I think when you want to communicate, please, first of all, we should have done a priori an exercise about the need of the society. Please ask the common man that, what do you want? No, what do you want? For example, let us take an example of elderly people. Now you can see the elderly population is increasing across the world. Before you start developing a device, before you start, you know, putting a lot of efforts into developing, putting money, putting effort into the research, have we done the requirements study? When I say requirement studies, it's not a market survey, what I'm saying. We should create forums where people can express what they want. And it is possible that is a not of commercial value at the moment. Okay, it is because when you are a corporate, you always look for commercial returns. But that means, but then let us have a bank of requirement of the people, and then pick up that and then start using that part of it. So the corporate should say, well, this would give me money, but this would give me goodwill. You corporate spend a lot of money on publicizing, publicizing, advertising, it'll be there. So meeting a requirement of an individual, which is of not much of commercial value, can also be a good publicity to the corporate. I think so. One need to do is that if suppose I'm working on elderly care, if suppose my corporate is working in elderly care, I should create a forum where I talk to elderly care about what is their requirement. Keep on accumulating those requirements. And it is possible that at some stage, your requirement of X would become feasible. It's many times you're asking people to, today, if I ask you what is your requirement, your immediate thoughts is about immediate concern. You would not tell about what is your concern after 10 years or 20 years. So that is possible that, and the same way, if you want to implement something, it may not be possible to implement today with the available technologies or available methodologies out there. So the problem comes in the habit of the people. Okay. So how do you break the habit? How do you cajole them to take it? And you're going to tell them you're going to do it. And then the most important thing is that if the common man believes that you're not telling this because you get some benefit out of it, and that would happen if a corporate is going to tell, please use this, it'll help you in elderly care. You would not believe it. You'll always have a suspicion. When you see an advertisement, you always say that it is a suspicion. So I would say involve voluntary organizations to interface between the corporates and the users. I think I'm a user, I'm a corporate, then I can say, see, you have this requirement, maybe this can work for you. And that would help people. And sometimes to be successful, just that push is required. A little bit push is required. If one start using it, he would spread it. It will be there. So I think so. I will not worry about larger commercial innovations, which anyway you don't have to worry about it, because there'll be competitors, there will be advertisement, they'll pushing. So that anyway they will push you. But what we're looking at is that where care is there and social responsibility, pushing people, making people comfortable. In such cases, I think create a mechanism, a platform where the needs are listed and the solutions are listed. And then the communicators can say, well, maybe for this need, this can help. And since Agata, she's come from different countries, you would see that each country has the different requirements and different belief systems. And you cannot say what is applicable in Poland would work in Singapore, and what can work in Ireland may not work in Singapore. And if you come to a country like India, if what works in Tamil Nadu may not work in Uttaranchal. So I think we need to take cognizance of this diversity in the way we look at things. And then I think you'd be able to break that barrier. And then I think if you're able to make people to think about the possibility, then you're successful. I think that's where I said in the beginning that your job is, responsibility is to bring awareness about the possibilities.
Sure.
And then I think it will happen.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. That was really, how would I say, these are things that people really do not think about when they develop an innovation in their lab. So it's very important to have the end user or the end stakeholder in mind, and then kind of work back from the thing. So thanks, Prof. People, you can start framing your questions in mind. This much amount of insight, I'm sure on a daily basis, we wouldn't be meeting like people like Prof. Baba or Agata, to whom we get this opportunity to ask this question, because most of the people who are joining us on Zoom and also on FB are innovators or researchers. So it's a great opportunity for you guys to ask questions to the people who are behind this and the experts in this field. So which I think will help you shape your technology accordingly. And my next question, before I see people are joining a little bit late, but it's okay. Okay, my next question to Agata, a very much more generic question. I think the audience are like really overwhelmed with insights from both of you. So a very simple but difficult question, Agata. And it's very important for me because being a woman Agata, in a man's world, it's really very difficult to get tasks done. That is the general notion. But then as a woman innovator, and I also have seen in my career a few positive sides of this journey, being a woman in a man's world. It would be great if you could share with us how encouraging or positive was it to travel in a man's world for you to get tasks done. Yeah.
I think the answer to this question has kind of been a theme of also the other questions or the answers that were already touched on, and it's literally one word, and it's perspective. Identifying the context for the implementation of the innovation, the product, the solution is extremely important. So something that Prof. Baba also mentioned, me coming, like someone coming from India to Poland, or me coming to your hometown and saying, hey, this is a solution that worked in my place, it's definitely going to work here. Let's just put it in place. But, what about the healthcare structure? What about the regulatory context? What about the cultural context and different role of a family doctor, different access, the distribution routes of drugs, let's say, or the technology, different infrastructure, different attitude, different age profile, etc., etc., etc. So the implementing of the solution without the perspective of who it will be deployed to will be really hard. So you need to check for that perspective, and it might be shared. It might be the same one, but then that's a signal for you to like, that's the green line to go ahead. Okay, so this seems very logical, right? And now you think about having a fully male board making decisions about the technology that is supposed to be deployed in a certain country, and 50% of that country are females, without a female voice in that board. And even worse, if the decisions are made on female issues like female health without giving enough attention to the female perspective, right? So, and you can replace gender with ethnicity or sexual orientation or age, etc. And I feel the diversity of perspective is extremely important. And diversity of experiences, backgrounds, genders, all of it that we bring to the table, and that's something that I can do. I can provide, and that's what I do in my career. I do provide a perspective from my neuroengineering background, from me being a female, from me being a European, and so that's one thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the Female Scientist Network. So in my cultural context, we are very much so in the transition stage. So things are slowly moving towards equal opportunity, between genders, but it's a slow process. The previous generation had it actually much harder. The previous generation of female scientists, to the point that let's say, for example, in the 70s in Singapore, there were quota on how many medical female students can join the medical course. So as plus the additional aspect of the childbearing that slows down careers at a certain age, as a consequence, there are not many females in the academic leadership at the moment, right? Because these are the women that dropped out of science at one point due to the lack of this historical equal opportunity. But the women that got there, they are very strong in terms of the science, in terms of the leadership, and being able to relate to those type of role models is a very powerful tool. In fact, having a relatable role model and mentor is that's what science shows, is one of the strongest tools of bringing diversity into STEM or other fields or into politics. You can think about Barack Obama, Barack and Michelle Obama, the impact that they had on what were the dreams of the American Black Americans. Or you can think about all the female leaders now, the Prime Minister in New Zealand. That changes the perspective, and where females or the people from like other diversity sides are aiming.
Yeah.
And also I wanted to add that for long my idea was like my perspective on this matter of the gender was that in a professional setting there should not be a perception of gender at all.
Yes, that's right.
So I wanted to be addressed as a scientist, not as a female.
That's right.
And our minds have to make so many decisions, like each day, that we are wired to make shortcuts and introduce bias. So I actually changed my mind about the whole of not seeing the gender. I actually think it's very important to see it, to see the ethnicity, to see the whole cultural background that we bring in, and actively act against the bias that is in ourselves.
Yeah.
So for our listeners that might be still in college, in your project, in your college project, make a point of including diversity in your team. Maybe for once, don't work with your friends that are probably similar to you, because we're drawn to people that are similar to us. But get all those perspectives in, embrace the process of having a discussion. The other things are also include more graphic, more accurate graphic representation. So if you give a talk about your device and you use this middle-aged white doctor in a coat, why not include a more diverse, representation of what really doctors look like? And also be mindful about the language that you use to your colleagues, or about the lecture that you don't like. It's the classic bossy versus boss that relates to females. So you see, I think all these small things, they really create the context, and communication and context are everything. And we are a part of it, and we should be working on including the diversity into the academic setting, and creating this context for females and for different types of minorities to grow.
Yep. That's right. Yeah, that's why we have, even in our first session today, woman and a man, a young woman and a wise old man, young wise woman and a wise old man. Okay. We are not being ageist here, just to show that we are diverse. Yeah. Prof is actually very young at heart. So for the want of time, let me open the session to the audience. Audience, if you have any questions, you can raise your hands and Hemanand will unmute you so that you can ask the question yourself. I really very strongly encourage people to, ask questions. It's just, I always see that people are very reluctant to come forward and ask questions during a general forum, but this is just online. Your videos are going to be muted. So please don't, videos are off. So please don't be shy. Please feel free to ask questions. If the audience do not have questions, then it would be just me asking questions. Yeah. Hemanand, you can unmute yourself. Are there any questions from the audience? Is anyone raising hands?
Right now, they have not. I have not found any questions that's posted publicly. However, there are two questions. The one that we earlier saw.
Okay.
Let me just pass out the questions to you.
Okay. Yeah, I actually got your questions on the chat. You passed to me privately. Let me take the question. Okay. So to both the speakers, because of want of time, and we'd only have 15 minutes more left, I see that there are many people who have joined late, but we will be ending it on time. Doesn't matter. Okay. I think there was some confusion between with the time for many people. First question to Prof. Prof, to you from Kartikeya Shukla from CSIR. After the COVID-19 crisis, how do you see science and technology communication in India will be affected? So let's keep the answers short and crisp. So I'll repeat the question from Kartikeya from CSIR. After this COVID-19, how do you think science and technology communication in India will be affected? Yeah.
I think maybe better word which should be how it will be altered. I think this is what I think. So what I would say is that now you can see actually the world has shrunk really. The COVID made us to get together newer platforms which we were hesitant to use earlier are being used. And the first thing is that in a health pandemic like COVID has made people realize how important it is to communicate to people. I mean, what to do, what not to do, what care to be taken. So there's a realization that this one domain which needs to be given impetus. So that would happen. That's one change would happen, because we seem to be learning from, it's like a jerk given to the humanity. And now you are realizing that I have to communicate, wash your hands or take these precautions. So I would see that the realization of importance of communication has sunk into the decision makers. So I would see a lot happening in this domain. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is even the mediums that can be utilized. The earlier, if I wanted to organize a meeting, you need a lot of travel, a lot of money, a lot of funds requirement. But now it would happen that you can communicate from the place where you are. And I think the science communicators or the students of science communicators should learn to equip themselves with the modern technologies of audio, video mediums, the online, distant way of communicating, connecting to the people. In fact, it will open up newer opportunities, and that's what I would see happening to the communication. Because in the beginning, I mentioned how important it is to communicate to the people and to the society.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Prof. Any questions from the audience? I see a few students. It's your chance to ask question. Okay, if you are still shy to ask questions, you can type it in the chat box and we can take it from there. Because for people who are involved in science and technology, research, innovation, communicating science is very important. So we really wanted to have this talk out of all the talks on the series first, because it's very important to know how to communicate. So if there are any questions from the audience, Hemanand?
Nothing until now.
Okay. If not, there's a question sent to me privately to Agata Surya Narayana from SBIT. How effectively will people adopt newly implemented innovations post-pandemic? How effectively will people adopt newly implemented innovations in post-pandemic era? Yeah. Now, Agata, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Working in the digital health space, we have seen quite a big changes in the attitude towards that form of deploying healthcare. So telemedicine in particular has just accelerated so fast, and COVID pandemic itself made us realize that we have to be ready to deploy some of the technologies when we cannot physically see each other, and deploy the technologies that consider that as a very important factor to it. So yeah, we see the rise in the telemedicine and other digital healthcare technologies, and those are probably going to stay. They are likely to stick. Just like, initially we're all a bit weirded out with all the Zoom meetings and all the Zoom calls, but it seems like they might become a part of our lives. People will be a bit more willing to do that. And it is also something that we see in the older population, that this barrier kind of had been broken now into using e-commerce, for example, just because it was a necessity And once it's not as scary anymore, there is a bigger chance that these things will stick. So I'm actually very keen to see the results of how the technology is adopted in the post-COVID world. But we think it's going to be a little bit different, especially for the digital technologies than it was before.
Okay.
Thank you, Agata. Yes.
Yeah. So we have 10 more minutes. And before we wind up, one last question to you, Prof. If out there, like most of them, including me, we are all innovators. If we've been talking about how to communicate the innovation to the policymakers, to the general public. Yeah, we've been talking about that. But to people like us, the innovators itself, aspiring innovators, just tell us one tip to how effectively communicate science. Like, what's the easiest medium to reach out to people to start with? Yeah. Prof, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
But Viveka, unfortunately there are no quick tips to learn things. So I think what is important to be a communicator is to be unbiased. First of all, you should be unbiased.
Yeah.
And if the moment you put forward the information or the facts about that, then the audience will be with you.
Okay.
That means if you want to say an innovation which you are developing, want to be reached to the people, don't start with saying that how good your innovation is.
Sure. Yeah.
Start with where the need is, the need which is there, and there are different ways of solving this problem or different ways of meeting this need, and this is one such thing.
Okay.
Then I think you can bring not being biased with your innovation.
Yeah,
so that is that. Then you can connect to the people. Then explain maybe this is what it can do, and this is what would be that. And in fact, you remember I told there's something called publicizing thing, and bringing awareness to the thing. And these, if you keep in mind that your communication is not to publicize or to bring publicity to your innovation, you would win the hearts of the people. I think it's so the crux of communication is, the challenge of communication is to make people think about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Then I think they would do the job. And you can see that in one philosophical aspect of communication, I will tell you, the decisions are taken by individual.
Yeah.
It is ultimately his or her decision. But you're only enabling the decision making by providing information to them. So if you want to be a very good science communicator or communicator, do this part of it, or bring awareness about what are the possibilities of this. And then I think you would see that then you can reach to the people. So if you want to become a good communicator, please learn to analyze it objectively and then put forward, yes, this is what is the requirement and these are the possibilities. And I see a lot of possibilities that are happening in the society. Maybe we should give it a try.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, all right. That's really wonderful. I should tell you both that I know personally, this is like a personal bragging. I know both of you very well, like individually, but putting together in the context of a discussion, I know that Agata does so-and-so and Prof is an expert in this, but having this chat really has opened up a lot of, new insights, and there is definitely a paradigm shift in my own thought process. I don't know about the audience. For me itself, I'm looking at things very differently now after having this conversation. And Prof, as he rightly said, there's a really very fine line between looking like a hard-selling person and looking like a person who is genuinely interested in bringing awareness and really interested in, reaching out to people. So in a way, this looks like we are, in a way, very indirectly, we opened up this way for our next week's talk. So looks like science communication and translation are not two different things. Even in translation, when you're trying to spin off or commercialize a technology, you need to talk about the need to have this technology in the market. So that will be our topic for next week, where I will be one of the speakers and Prof. Sai Baba, one of our advisors of Avant-Garde Initiatives. He's going to moderate. So he's going to do all the talking, while my very good friend, Marlana is also a friend of Agata. You see, all these very lovely women who are trying to empower each other by sharing their insights. So Marlana and I will be sharing tips, sharing our stories, challenges about commercializing our technology. So please do join next week. And I, start getting a few feedback on my phone already, and looks like 11 a.m. IST and 11:30 p.m. SGT has been a little bit confusing. People, I don't know how to solve. Okay, next time, this is a good feedback. Let us stick to a universal time line for next week. But for now, people in India, it's going to be 11 a.m. in a Sunday morning next week again. For people in India, it's always 11 a.m. Sunday morning. We are so grateful to you, because Sunday morning 11 a.m. is too early. I know that, but please do come join us. And for people in Singapore, it's 1:30 p.m. SGT. So join us next week. And if you have any questions, please write to our Gmail. I'm not even going to repeat it. It's very difficult. You can take a picture of the screen, and please log on to our website, avantgarde-initiative.com. And for the Gmail, there's no hyphen. Yeah, you can, if you have more specific questions, people who did not ask now, but if you really want to connect with Agata or Prof. Baba, you can write to the Gmail ID, your questions. If they are really very pressing and you need an answer, we would send it to them and get you the answers. And if you have any other questions regarding being a part of Avant-Garde Initiatives itself, you can write to me at this Gmail ID. Thank you so much, all of you. At Avant-Garde Initiatives, we really believe in keeping up time. We are all very punctual people. So yeah, thanks a lot. Hope to see you all again next week. Yeah. Yeah, so that is it. I'm going to end the meeting now. If anything more.
Yeah, thank you, Viveka, for conducting well,
Prof.
and Agata for a perspective. So good, and
Yeah.
I think so. We would look forward to continuing this, and then
Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to us.
Yes, and people in the audience who would want to get connected to Agata or Prof to in collaborative efforts or something, like people on the Facebook Live or on the Zoom call, please do write to us. We are all people who are committed in empowering each other. So please feel free. Thank you so much, all of you. See you again next week. Yeah, bye. Bye-bye.